Let's talk about love and marriage, the way that God intended. Life experience, here we share it. The No Fruit Podcast. Tune in from any platform. No Fruit Podcast will help your spirit transform.
We thank you very much for tuning in to the No Fruit Podcast. We have a special guest today. She is an adoptive mother and was inspired to write her memoir, Love at the Border, an adoption adventure about her own family journey to Mexico. Now her Life Adventures children's books feature stories about adoption, foster care, stepchildren, and all blended families. She hopes that her books encourage open and honest exploration about what children are thinking and feeling within their own unique family. We thank y'all very much for tuning in, and what makes this guest even more special is that we're all from the area. We're from Philly, so we thank y'all very much for tuning in, and I present to y'all Maria DiDio. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Sure, no problem.
So, Anna, Maria, with this, again, we have a Philadelphia connection. We have another connection where we are both parents of adult children.
You're right.
And we're trying to, get through that process. And a lot of our listeners are doing the same thing, trying to move through managing adult children. Tell us a little bit about how are you doing that and what's that like with you in this stage of life?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting. They're on their own, and I call them the latest bloomers ever. The older one is our biological child. The younger one is our adopted child. And they're both entering new kind of phases of their career. So that's been that's put a pause on a lot of things and move some things forward. One's back at school. And so it's been, all the energy's been focused on that. And they're not living at home. So they're on their own. So So knock wood, they're still doing well. Thank you for asking.
Ours are still living at home, so we look forward to that day when they are on their own. But I still have a feeling that they still will be at home, even though they're
for quite some time
away from home. So you mentioned that you have an adoptive child and a blended family, and some of our listeners are also in blended families and have stepchildren, things like that. So I know that comes with some extra things, that may have to go in as a parent. Tell us a little bit about how that is parenting a blended family, an adoptive family, stepchildren, even at that cost. Yeah.
Well, it started with, let me start by saying that all adoption begins with trauma. Mm-hmm. So our family adoption was an international one. So we, just through a set of circumstances, we found out about an organization in Mexico that was coordinating with an organization in the U.S., and children were here for the summer, and these kids were available for adoption. So we began to look into it. So we ended up visiting this orphanage in Mexico and met a young girl when she was 6 years old, and we adopted her. We obviously started the paperwork and all the requirements necessary for the adoption, and then adopted her. She came to live with us when she was almost 7 years old. So really the kind of the genesis of my books and the reason I'm so passionate about this cause is, as I said before, the adoption begins with trauma. And by that, I mean the separation of the child from their birth mother. But our daughter had it 2 times over in that she had to leave her country.
Right.
And she lost her language and just all the sights and smells and food. And the caregivers at the orphanage were so loving and had grown close to her. So it was very traumatic, and she had a very long transition period. And honestly, I did not appreciate or even realize that the significance and the depth of this trauma. And so that's the reason, I started thinking about it and writing about it and trying to cope. But it was difficult with a biological child who had been an only child for many years, and then this new girl on the scene, and it was traumatic. It was traumatic for everyone, and it was a long transition process.
So how do you prepare your daughter, for that, moving into, like you said, you went to Mexico knowing that this program was happening. So how do you prepare? And it's different to prepare yourself for it because it's something you're looking forward to. But how do you prepare a child for that? Tell us a little bit about that.
And so she was in Mexico for most of that time, and we had heard from the agency that she was being told and prepared, but it really didn't happen. When she came to the U.S., it seemed to be a very big shock to her that she was going to live with us.
Okay.
So how did that miscommunicate? So we had a long road ahead that honestly we turned to professionals and stayed in touch with other adoptive families, stayed in touch with her caregivers from Mexico. And it was very gradually. I mean, I'm not saying it was all kind of trauma and tears, but she did cry for a long time. And, obviously there were moments of great joy and she's adjusted but it was a lot for her to get used to.
Yeah.
So, before I go into the next idea, I think it's just traumatic just coming to Philadelphia anyway. So it's just the city that we live in, right? But how did this affect your marriage? Or even your career, because this has to be a traumatic experience as well.
Well, we took a little bit of a divide and conquer sort of mentality. I had a job that was required a longer commute, was farther away, was required travel sometimes, and my husband had a position where it was just a few miles from the house. So he did a little bit of the dance lessons, pickup, and some doctors. And then because the school was very close to our home, so I would try to leave and get to all the athletic events. So we and because he's a professor, he was in charge of homework. So that kind of thing. We sort of split what we could because there was, as you said, there was a potential for burnout with issues, but it was it worked out. It worked out.
And I think with all parenting, I know Maurice and I, when you're just going over just all of the different activities that the children are participating in. We have one daughter and one son, so they're not always at the same activities. So we do have to divide and conquer, and it is a lot of communication between the two of us of sitting down and saying, okay, well, here's what's on the agenda this week. We have doctor's appointments, we have after-school programs, we have, all day games on Saturday, and then we have church on Sunday, and we have this, so it was kind of really sitting down, like you said, and being a manager of it all, and trying to work through that. So I'm glad we're not the only ones that were in that boat. But it can be tough, it can be tough.
And honestly, we, our younger adopted daughter and the older, they were completely different students. The older one was so just very much into school and reading, and the younger one I would joke that the younger one spent more time trying to get out of homework than actually doing it. So we did take a little bit of a tough love approach after parent-teacher conferences when we found out that homework wasn't being done, and changed our tactics to a nightly review. We signed up. I don't know whether at the time you had it. The I don't know. I think it was called Parent Connect or something.
Yeah.
And the grades and
you can see the assignments.
Would be all sent to you via email or something electronically. And she was so upset that we did that.
Right, because now you know all the assignments. Yeah, they can't get around it. It's like,
every single night. And so that took a while to get into a routine. But, we were pretty adamant about this is not it's not up for discussion.
Right.
We do our homework. We show up at dance class. We we are polite. I make one dinner. I don't. This is not a restaurant. So we had a lot of the rules that we just stuck by.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm listening to you talk about this young lady transitioning in education and schools and things like that. And so from a cultural perspective, just i.e. psychological idea, was there like a language barrier or anything like that she had to deal with that? Because a lot of times in a blended family, we're not sure what their background might have been or of past experiences, whatever it might have been. So was there any other type of challenges that you might have seen or experienced between just you and her, and then she in the school or whatever else it might have been?
Well, that's a good question because, of course, she had grown up speaking Spanish, and children are so resilient and so smart. She learned English within just a few months. However, losing her language, losing the language of her birth was so, I could see it just made her so sad. I mean, she was just, she couldn't speak Spanish anymore. And then she was in second grade. And then when middle school happened, it took a few years, but when middle school happened and she was in Spanish class again, a spark reignited. And so we did provide some tutors and extra help support for her to learn Spanish again. But kids are just, it was kind of a stop, start, stop. So she couldn't make up her mind whether she wanted to do it. It wasn't until high school and Spanish became more of a regular effort. And then, of course, in college, she was able to master Spanish enough to do a study abroad in Mexico and in Spain.
Nice.
And that was really a turning point. I realized that's many years, but it really was a turning point when she reclaimed the ability to speak Spanish again. And there was such a connection to her roots, and it just made her super happy. So
I think I hear another book coming. That's Turning Point is a great story. I think that'd be great. So tell us a little bit about the books that you do have.
Well, all of my books are inspired by actual family events. So I have 3 picture books. The first is, and this is about a girl named Carla in the picture books, who is adopted from Colombia. So it is an international story, but the themes are very applicable to blended families. And they're not about my daughter specifically, because she would kill me if I wrote any more about her. So I had to stop that. Stop, TMI.
Yes.
So the first book is called Many People to Love, and it's about the transition from Carla to the U.S. from Colombia, and just the everything that she lost, the sights and sounds and what she was used to, and getting used to living in a home and not living in a group situation. And the second book is called How I Wonder Where You Are. So this is kind of a unique sentiment that I just want to give parents permission and the opportunity to explore with adopted children, stepchildren, foster children, just thinking about and be open and receptive to questions about their biological roots, where they come from, who do they look like, what did their first family look like? So this is again about Carla, and she's asking those questions and just feeling sad that her sister, who is biological, looks like her parents, but she does not. So the trigger for that was actually a family tree assignment that my daughter struggled with. We were putting, just soon after she arrived at our home, she was asked to make a family tree in second grade. And we were putting people on this tree that she had never met, and it was so hard for her. So again, it's up to parents to be sensitive to these activities and respond. And then the last picture book is called Carla the Conqueror, and Carla is asked to read a story aloud to her classmates. And with the language struggles that my daughter had, reading aloud was terrifying for her. And so Carla responds by working very diligently with her ESL teacher. I don't know if they call it ESL anymore, but her language teacher, and getting the support she needs to read out loud. So, and actually this week I'm releasing a new book called Grace's Right Time. Grace is book smart, but has trouble making friends. And so she meets a boy named Andy who is adopted, and he is interested in, he wants to have Grace help him find his birth mother.
Oh, wow.
So his adoption was secret. And so they set out on an adventure to find his birth mother. Wow. So that's a little bit about family dynamics and what kids are feeling. So that's really the theme of my books. And it's all about parents and children discussing these things without hurting each other's feelings and being open to that. It's natural for children to wonder about these things, and parents shouldn't feel, hurt or insulted, and children should feel encouraged to think about these things. So,
again, I'm sorry, my brain just goes off to left field sometimes. But it just sounds like that, you should probably take these books and turn them into short films or movies, because sometimes people kind of learn that way, ultimately. And it sounds like they would be interesting. Again, I'm just thinking about my own schooling times. It could be a PBS special, a Saturday morning cartoon type thing. But ultimately, I think what you're talking about which is key, which is communication. And that's something that we kind of miss out on. We don't communicate as often, especially with social media and these phones of ours and tablets of ours, how we are so disconnected. So how or why are you concentrating so much on that key component being communication, which a lot of us are losing?
Well, it's really about making the time because they're picture books. I thought that would be the perfect opportunity for parents and children to spend that time together. It's not something, and I have a little note to parents at the beginning of each book with some things to keep in mind, some best practices for blended families, and they're really meant to be experienced together. So that's how I'm approaching this kind of communication thing. It's just a way for these difficult topics to be raised.
Interesting. And I asked that because one, I see that you also have your master's in social work, and so your background and your schooling and things like that tends to see this. Again, our daughter, she's going to psychology, so we hear all these psychology conversations almost like 100% of the time. And she works in a children's school as well. So she's a teacher while she's in graduate school. And so so we hear these points that you're bringing out that sounds like is very, again, these skills that we're not mastering right now. Even though I spoke to my aunt the other day, and she spoke about how her kids or people that she's associated with, they don't know how to read cursive. Like just little things like that, so that's why I hear the importance of communication, and how we just don't communicate, because I think that's an integral part for your daughter as she transitioned from Mexico to here. There had to be a lot of communication, a lot of empathy, sympathy, care, hugs, kisses, whatever it might have been for that transition. So that's why I am pointing that idea out.
Yes, you're right on the point there. It's multi-sensory. I tried to do as many hugs, and because and she lived in a group situation, and that was not, and that there were so many children there. What was their routine? So it was a whole nother routine that we just had to tread carefully, and kind of get her acclimated to a family situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it took years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but, we thank you very much for coming on the show. We thank you for sharing your books and your ideas. Please let us know where we can direct everyone to find your books, find your website, and even hear more things about you and your family.
Well, the books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but all the information is available on my website, and that's amdidio.com, amdidio.com. So there are some other photos, actually some recipes, and I have a quiz on there. What kind of father are you? I wrote that when I was thinking about my dad, but there's also what I call a positive affirmation fun sheet. So one of the themes of my book is also adoption, blended family, children within blended families, their identity, their confidence. How do we build that? And positive affirmations can be part of that. And on my website, I have a fun activity sheet that that has some affirmations that kids can use.
Nice. Well, again, thank you very much for coming on. Of course, all the things that you just mentioned will be in the show notes. But before we let you go, we have to ask you our question that we asked you in the green room, right? So, Kafa, would you like to ask that question?
So it's a really tough question. And everybody knows who's been listening to the podcast. We've asked all of our guests this question. So if you would have to do a duet with anyone, living or not, who would you do that duet with?
Well, I'm tempted just to say don't laugh, but I'm going to say Bono.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's fine.
For years, I admired, of course, the music, the message, his awareness of the struggles in our world, how far we've come, how far we have to go. And I just love the music. And even though I can't sing, I could be on tambourine or cowbell, and I do have a little experience doing that.
Oh, that's nice. That's not a problem. We all have somebody we would like to sing with. If I had to ask, someone asked me, I'm not 100% sure. There's way too many people I would like to sing with. We used to sing in choir, so that's how we met. We met in church, and so so there would be a few people that I wouldn't mind singing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Besides her.
It's an interesting question. Yeah, it's an interesting question because today our pop culture and our celebrities represent so much more than just the music. I mean, what is the message? What are they like as people? I mean, that's something I look for.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. So and I think that's the reason why we started this podcast, just to have something positive. So I would have to have everybody fill out a whole form. Like, hey, well, we're on the same message because I don't need you messing up my brand at all.
Yes.
So, but thank you very much for coming on the show today. We appreciate it.
It was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. And of course, thank you for listening to the No Fruit Podcast, and we will talk to you a little later.
This week's episode has come to an end. But the fun doesn't have to stop here. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, head over right now to Twitter and Facebook and like, share, and get involved. Join us next time.